So I shared a little bit about this in my blog this week, but this past week, during our staff meeting, which we have every Tuesday, we do a little check-in, just sharing about what's going on in our lives, and so we can connect with each other. And Jackie Bullen, who is our Youth and Family Ministry co-director, shared that she's living in a space of what's next. And I didn't really ask her a lot of information about that, but I just, how we do sometimes, we make up our own stories about what people mean. And so I thought, well, she's probably looking at some changes in her life, some transitions. I know that that her youngest daughter, Katie, she and George's youngest daughter, Katie, is graduating from high school this year and is going to be going off to college. And I can imagine that's an interesting transition to go through for parents when your last child is moving out of the house and going to college and those kinds of things. And so, so transitions. And I was thinking, we all go through transitions in our lives. Life changes. Our situations change. It's like it's constant, really, isn't it? Things just continue to change and evolve, and we're always going through some kind of transition in our lives, and that's just the way of it. One thing we can be sure of with life is that it's going to change, right? And so we can look at those, and we can accept that, and we can, we can accept it or we can resist it, depending on how we really want to feel about it. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, I can relate to that, and sometimes I relate to that about, what's next? Wow, I'm excited about what is next. And sometimes we have this attitude of, oh my God, what's next? You know how that can be? It's like there are two kinds of people. The people that get up in the morning and say, "Good morning, Lord," and the other people that say, "Good Lord, it's morning." And we sort of get to choose which of those we are. What is our attitude about life, Am I looking at what is my next challenge going to be? Or am I looking at, I don't know what good you have in store for me, but bring it on, I really like to approach life that way. So what's next? And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about what's next for us, what's next as we move past Easter. There's a lot of energy goes into planning an Easter service and executing that. And then we had last weekend with the community choir and how the energy that created and the work that went into that. And so it's like a lot of things went on. And so I'm thinking, are we just going past that and now we're planning Christmas? That's kind of the way it seems to work sometimes in spiritual centers and churches. You move from one event to the next, and there's a lot of energy that goes into that. And so I'm just encouraging us to not let that be the truth. I'm encouraging myself not to allow that to be the what's next, because I think it's so important for us to look at Easter, not to just let it be an event that goes by and that we just kind of make it through Easter and we celebrate resurrection and new life and that transformation that can occur. We celebrate this Easter, I used the analogy of the caterpillar going through the metamorphosis of becoming the butterfly. And that really can be what happens for us, but it doesn't just happen. That unlike the butterfly, who is now transformed, become a new creature, we can become a new creature, but then try to go back to being the caterpillar, We try to fit into that, like that poem was. You're a divine elephant with amnesia, trying to live in an anthole. You're a beautiful butterfly. You're a beautiful butterfly that has been transformed. Why do we want to try to go back and live in a form that no longer fits us? That we are no longer. But sometimes I think it's easy for us to go back into that and to think of ourselves as that. If you read my blog this week, you know what I shared about that. And as I thought about that, I was reminded of this wonderful thing that I read many times by Howard Thurman, who is a civil rights worker and a theologian, and he wrote it about Christmas. So I want to share that with you this morning. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among the people, to make music in the heart. And as I thought about that, I was thinking about, well, then what is the work of Easter? When thinking about it from that perspective, and so I came up with this question, really. When the cross is bare, when the stone has been rolled away, when new life is awakened in resurrection, when the true light is revealed as the self, the work of Easter begins. To know yourself as the risen Christ, to embody the light as your own, to bring the light to the darkness, to share the light with every thought, word, and action, to boldly be the light in the world so that we can feed the hungry, set the prisoner free, do all of that he talked about as the work of Christmas. It's the same work. And so we have the opportunity to embrace a new way of being in the world if we allow ourselves to do that. And I think that is really the work, the what's next that follows Easter if we allow it to be. To be the risen Christ in the world. And as I was preparing for that, this week, I did a workshop yesterday about prayer, which we had 17 people attend, and I was really grateful for that. So, and I loved doing that, so I appreciate those of you who showed up for that. As I was preparing, I ran across some interesting things that Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, wrote. And this comes from Jesus Christ Heals. He says, "It has been our experience in developing the faculties of mind that the more we affirm a certain thing, the stronger it becomes. But we must have the understanding that our relation to God is that of a son to a father, that we exist in the one mind as an idea, and that this idea does work in us as a superman, even Christ." He says it had long been prophesied that the time was ripe for the advent on this planet of a new race. And there had been much speculation as to the character and the advent of the Superman. Herein is set forth the metaphysical idea of the spiritual awakening of man on the human plane and his transformation into the divine. Not by a miracle or a fiat of God, but by the gradual refinement of man of flesh into the man of spirit. I love that he was using the word Superman as a word that describes our awakening into the divine essence of who we are, the Christ self, that Christ energy, the Christ consciousness that we allow, that we awaken to and develop and become. That's what he was saying, and he referred to that as the Superman, or I would say the Superwoman, or the Supergirl, or the Superboy, the super consciousness. And as I thought about that, I thought, wow, isn't that interesting that he uses the word Superman? And I had to go back and look at the whole story of the comic book Superman. And I was amazed at what I found that I had really forgotten about. That Superman was sent to Earth from a planet called Krypton. He was sent by his parents because that planet was going to be destroyed. And he was the last survivor. He would be the only survivor of Krypton. Sent to Earth. And sent to Earth to actually help humanity. To be a light, to be hope. In fact, the S on his costume is not only a symbol of his family, but it is a symbol, a Kryptonian symbol of hope. And so he represented hope coming to Earth. And what I found interesting too is that his name, his Kryptonian name, was Kal-El. And in looking at some information about that, there's some Hebrew association with that name. That if you look at the letters in Hebrew, it describes, or it's related to something that would say the voice of God. The voice of God. Or an El as a suffix on a name represents being of God, like angels often have El as their last two letters. So I thought that was very interesting. So he comes, Kal-El comes to Earth. He's adopted by a human family, an earthly family, and they raise him as their own. But the interesting thing is that he has these special powers, that he is not restricted by the gravity of the earth or the other elements of our earth, that he is beyond that. He has special powers, superpowers. But they tell him not to show those to other people, right? Because they're afraid that somebody might come and take him away. So he lives this life of being Clark Kent, right? And so he grows up, and then eventually he's called by just a knowing to discover who he truly is. And so he leaves his home and he goes and he has this, in the movie version, he has this beautiful crystal palace that shows up, and that's where he discovers himself and all the information about who he really is. And then he goes out into the world, and he is a reporter for the Daily Planet, and he hides behind this image until he is needed. And then he goes into a phone booth, which would be impossible today, and transforms into Superman. And so I thought about, wow, isn't it interesting that Charles Fillmore used this terminology, Superman, to describe our Christ nature, and that how we can hide, that we grow up in these human families that tell us who we are, right? And they imprint upon us these ideas about who we're supposed to be, that we're not supposed to be that we're not that in some way. Our society tells us we're not that, encourages us to suppress our own truth sometimes, our own power, our own natural being. And so we grow up with that, and we learn to hide who we truly are very often. And then many people live their lives totally that way. But we have a choice. And Easter can be the beginning of that choice for us. To truly awaken to the Superman, the Superwoman, the Superboy or Supergirl that we are inside. And it's our opportunity to do that. And I thought this was a wonderful little, to be Um, to be Clark Kent and to hide behind. That always amazed me that he took his glasses off and nobody knew who he was. So just the symbolism of that, that we hide behind these masks, these costumes, these ways of being in the world that hide our power. And yet we have the power of the Christ within us. Just like Superman. What I really enjoyed about that was that Superman, one of his powers is that he could fly. And so he was able to then remove his costume and fly to rise above the world, to rise above the stuff that was happening in the world, and to see it from a different perspective. And you and I have that power as well. In fact, when we are being the Christ, when we are raised in our awareness of who we truly are, we can call upon that Christ within us, our super power, to lift above in our consciousness that which we perceive as evil, that which we perceive as whatever we fear, and to perceive it from a higher perspective. Because when we do that, we assist in lifting the vibration of what we perceive as negative, as difficult, as evil. We have the power within us if we choose. Or we can continue to wear that costume and be in the muck of it, to contribute to it. How many of us in our daily activities contribute to the negativity that is out there on Facebook, social media? How many of us are continuing to contribute to that energy? How many of us are talking negatively about what's going on in the world? How many of us are continuing to be totally involved in adding to that energy? Now, I'm not saying not to be involved in the world, but what I am saying and encouraging us to do is to rise above the energy of fear and negativity and to perceive the activity of God, the activity of the Christ in and through all of it. Because only by doing that and only by raising our perspective can we ever hope to lift into a higher vibration the negativity, the fear, all that is going on in this dimension now that scares us. We are responsible. And again, I'm not saying don't be engaged, but as Superman, be engaged from a higher consciousness. That it is your opportunity to bring hope and to bring healing, to bring higher awareness to what's going on in our world, and not to continue to add to the negativity. That is our opportunity. Now, I will tell you, I have a problem with that myself. But when I am in that humanness, it's my opportunity and your opportunity to invite the Christ to rise up. You may even have to go in the bathroom and change your costume. I don't know. To think of yourself differently, but to invite the Christ awareness of you to as Paul said, allow the mind that was in Christ Jesus to be my mind so that I see things differently. And then from that perspective, swoop down like Superman and do something. Do something about it from that perspective. And also one of his powers was X-ray vision. Didn't you always, as a kid, want those glasses so you could have X-ray vision? They always advertise them in the back of the comic book, right? These X-ray vision glasses. My parents would never let me get them. But the idea that the Christ of us can allow us, if we invite it to see through to the truth, to look through what is happening, and to choose to see the divine, to look beyond. And I think it is important for us to really be aware that, we say it, we often say, I behold the Christ in you. But do we? And are we willing to behold the Christ in everyone, even the people that push our buttons the hardest, even the people that make it the most difficult for us to love them, even the people who do things that we disagree with completely, totally, that go against what we value? Can we choose? Can we give it over to the Christ of us and say, help me see it differently? Arise in my mind that Christ, that superpower, and allow me to see things differently. Help me. And what I want to share with you today is that is an invitation to your divine nature. And so I encourage us to say that when we are experiencing our own judgment. When it's difficult for me to see the Christ in you, invite the Christ to see through you, with you, as you, and see the truth. In some iterations of Superman, he also had the superpower of telepathy, or to hear what was really going on. And again, it's our opportunity to hear not what somebody necessarily is saying with their words that triggers us, something that we think, how in the world can you believe that? How in the world can you say that? How in the world can you possibly think that? To open our inner ears, our spiritual hearing, the power of the Christ within us, and hear what is not being said. But as we talk about in compassionate communication, to hear what is really alive, what values, what experiences, what needs, what feelings are going on in the other. Because it is through that we awaken to our commonality. We awaken to our connection with other people. Because believe it or not, we all share the same, what Marshall Rosenberg talked about as the universal human needs. We all want peace. We all want compassion. We all want connection. We all want love. We all want that. We just may have different ways of going about getting it. And so we can open our Christ ears and listen. Connect with other people that we disagree with. And in doing that, I think that would go such a long way to bringing hope, restoring peace, and connecting us in love with each other. You see, we have the choice. We do have a choice to say, what is next? What's next for me? And by choosing to say, I surrender to the Christ within and allow the Christ within to have its life as me, I awaken to my ability to see a different perspective, to truly behold the Christ in others and in myself, and to really hear what is happening beyond the surface. And through that, as we develop those powers, as Charles Fillmore said, it's not by some fiat of God, but it is a gradual awakening, and it's practice. It doesn't happen for us like that, at least not for most of us. It requires our willingness to practice it, to strengthen those powers through our practice of them. And so what's next for us? Are we really willing to be that new creature in Christ? Are we? We all get to decide to say, what's next? What's next in my life? And to choose, consciously choose, to truly be the embodiment of Christ in the world. Because we can be that new race that Charles Fillmore was talking about. We can be the race that brings peace to the planet, that brings harmony and order and love and light to this planet. Not through warring, not through combating, but through giving and sharing and choosing differently. And so I pray, I hope, that is what we choose. When we say, what's next? That we choose to say, I am the Christ expressing now, and I give it over and allow that Christ to shine through me with every thought, with every word, with every action.